I think that we have a unique option of being able to conduct our business in a couple of different ways, Dennis. And a lot of people, they want to create a culture that's reflective of what they do, who they are. But a lot of times, I think we overlook some of those base level things and some of the emotions that people don't think about when they're establishing company culture and what they're all about.
Yeah, some of them get very serious. I'm personally not one that likes it that serious. I like to have fun and enjoy it, cut up, and have a little laughter throughout the day. It makes the day go a lot faster.
I know that in terms of, when I've been able to make some breakthroughs, whether it be with, you know, personal or business relationships, being able to laugh at myself, being able to laugh at the situation, whatever it is, I think that it's a critical part of life. And so many times we think when we, start our careers or companies that we have to be so serious. But today we have Kevin Hubschmann, who is the founder over at Laugh, has a unique perspective. And I love this interview in so many different ways because what he talks about from a perspective of incorporating laughter into the workplace and how you really can take a look at what the unique benefits are. It's something that it seems so
Yeah.
obvious that if we can incorporate this into our businesses, we're going to make it last that much longer and get the most out of our employees. So let's take a listen to this one, Dennis. I really enjoyed this.
It's a good one.
WFH with two guys. Now here's Benny and Dennis.
I think the topic of business, Dennis, is a pretty serious matter, right? What we do is real serious stuff, isn't it?
Some people think so, but it's
Yeah.
a lot more fun if you laugh at yourself sometimes and realize that really sometimes we're comedians and don't realize it.
Yeah. And, some of the funnest cultures I've ever been participated in, I've worked for a bunch of different companies and whatnot, is that we don't take ourselves too seriously and we can laugh and having a good time. Is really part of life, right? And some of the joy that we looked at when we started our companies, we kind of take ourselves too serious, but we've happened to come across an entrepreneur who's really taken this to the extreme levels. And I love this idea in concept. But Kevin, hey, welcome to the show. We appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Hey, so talk a little bit about laughter. We were talking a little bit before we started recording, but laughter is a therapeutic in our lives. Whether it's in a personal level and we talk about, oh, I met so and so, and oh, he's so funny, or that person's a cut up. Well, that's a trait that people admire, and the ability to make people laugh is something that I think we revere in our culture, but also at the same time too, we sometimes lose the idea of laughter. So, obviously you've taken this to a different level, but what's your take on that, Kevin?
Well, there's a bunch of ways to think about it. I think one, when you are someone that has a great sense of humor and has the ability to find people's funny bones and get that, you really should be using that whenever you can, because when you make somebody laugh, you're decreasing their cortisol levels, that
Yeah.
stress hormone, and you're increasing their endorphins, that feel good hormone. So just simply that. And then when you are also doing it amongst people and in a group setting and specifically in work, you are, there's also the additive bonus of the bonding hormones that come as a result of laughing together. And then also when you're trying to teach something and you make people laugh while you're teaching something, studies have shown that people actually remember it better. So there's all of this amazing science that comes along with laughter. But a lot of people will say like, I'm not funny, and they'll put themselves down for some reason, whatever that might be. And so what I always say to those people is, well, you can be an amazing listener. You can be someone that is actively listening and really getting, like, just being someone that's really good at laughing with, because it's a two-way conversation. So I think that what people really lose sight of the fact that even the people telling humorous anecdotes or whatever, they need the audience members to be willing to listen, receptive. So it's the receptivity of kind of playing back and forth with one another. And then from there, you can just do so many amazing things together once you've created that trust through that, tennis game of laughter.
Yeah, and I,
Huh.
and I think laugh. It just makes the time go by faster. I mean, when you're working and you're doing stuff, if you're hunkered down and you're not happy, it's like the day takes forever. But if you're talking and engaging and having laughter with people, it just makes the day that much more productive. And I mean, it's like, why would you not want to add a little laughter to your life?
I'm with you. Yeah, I mean, I think I always talk about it from we go to work with a 9 to 5 personality. That's what I call it. That's like our mask that we have, and we all have it. I don't care who you are. It's that person that you put on. It's that metaphorical tie that you put on in the morning, and then you get to work, and then you let that tie go, and that after work, and that's your 5 to 9 personality. And a lot of people believe that you got to separate those two. And don't get me wrong, some of that stuff in the 5 to 9 should be kept at home, but you can let some of that creep in. And I think that comes with people having the psychological safety to creep that in. And so I think that's a big part of organizations and specifically leaders that create, like you had said, Benny, we like to laugh around here. We don't take ourselves too seriously. Well, that starts at the top. That starts with creating psychological safety so everyone feels that they can also bring a little bit of their 5 to 9 personalities to their 9 to 5s.
Well,
I mean,
and
it's fun just to create I call it funness in the workforce. I mean, I remember when I worked at Frito-Lay, and our phone number was 1 digit off of the Sears and Roebuck's customer service number. Well, we would get all those calls in, and we would just we were in cubes, and we would just sit there and hand it off from one to another. We'd just sit there and laugh at some of the questions they would ask, and it just made the day go by more fun. We didn't do it every day, but it's like if it just allowed it to be fun, because otherwise you could get really pissed that you keep getting these inbound calls that have nothing to do with work. But it's like, okay, let's make some fun out of this thing.
Did anyone sell any washing machines?
They were calling and complaining about their washers not working correctly and all that. We would just send it from one, and we just start laughing and rolling and hearing some of the
You just like,
complaints.
I think I earned some commission. Who do I talk to about
Yeah,
it?
exactly.
well, you really touched on it there too, Kevin, in terms of like from a culture perspective. And if the leadership embraces the idea of having, a little levity and being able to do that, I would imagine that what we're talking about here is kind of redefining the way that employees view not only leadership, they view the company and maybe being able to take their jobs a little less serious. Like the Dennis just mentioned, is the idea of being able to, you're going to get these calls that have nothing to do with Frito Lay, but it's a Sears call, and you guys can have fun with that. And that just seems like a peek into that whole cultural mind shift there.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's just it's making time for it. And I think that, companies are very focused on getting the most out of their employees while they're at work. And I think that
Mm,
they lose sight of the fact that employees are human beings, and human beings need to have motivations, and they need to feel like they're going to bat for the person that's keeping them from the rest of their lives, their families, honestly. And so, how do you create more of a family atmosphere? Sometimes it's not just money, and sometimes it's not just PTO. It's got to be in building a culture that makes you want to get up and go to work. It makes you want to be around the people every day because
yeah.
there's just a lot of good, energy bouncing off of people because it's a very light, joyous environment to work in, regardless of where you work. In the most serious organization where, people are doing surgeries or something in a hospital, or even if you're working at a place where you're getting phone calls from Sears and you're selling potato chips. So, it can be. I think it's really just a matter of how you're setting it up, and it all starts at the top.
I would imagine it's a brand differentiator too, as well. I mean,
Mhm.
we now have an outside view of what we think companies are. But if I'm a recruiting employees and I'm walking through the halls as I'm interviewing there, and people seem lighter and people seem like it's more, I won't say just like nonstop fun, but you can just feel the energy. And you all probably have been to companies where you could feel the weight of the company. It was just not that, even if they had the nice furniture and the nice desk, but people just were not what you were hoping them to be. But if you've gone to a company, I would imagine all of those are pretty evident too as well, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, I would call that sterile. Like, you can kind of feel it right away when you
Yep.
walk in.
Yeah.
I would see it when I was, at my company was such an anomaly that I worked at. It was called Splash, and the it really did come from the top down. Like, the leaders at that organization were amazing, and they were like really out there, and they were always bringing a sense of play, and
Mm.
play was one of our core values. And I think that that was like what was really evident. And I would see when I would go on sales calls to different organizations that were I'd call them even legacy organizations that have been around for forever. And it was the most like depressing place, or it was really nice, but everyone was like tucked away.
Yeah.
And it was like, we'll see each other when we all get to go eat a meal that's sponsored by the company. But other than that, let's get to work. So I think that every organization is different, but I was really blessed to be in an organization that really focused on making their employees incredibly proud to work there. And it was a retention strategy. I mean, I think I probably stayed there like 2 years longer than I would have because I felt that there was such a great culture there. And I felt like, man, if I leave, where else am I going to find something like this? And I mean, there was times where we had employees leave and come back a couple of months later because they were like, the grass wasn't greener. So I think that
Yeah.
there really is it's a benefit. It's such a big benefit. And I'm biased because I want people to invest in this kind of stuff, but it really can pay dividends in the form of just like, these intangibles, these soft skills, these things that people really feel like they're getting invested in that allow them to kind of just be rounded out more as a human being rather than, a more efficient worker. And I think that that is the side, that's why they call it soft skills, because like that side of it is probably not as massaged and worked on as much because you can't see a tangible result from it. You can't see the ROI by putting in these numbers and these things, and this skill investment resulted in this. It's a little bit more intangible, and I think that's why it's harder to invest in.
So, Kevin, talk about before we started recording, you were talking about how being a stand-up comedian and being a business owner, it's very similar. Talk about, I thought that was great how you kind of compared those two. And I think for business owners, it's something to think about.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I'm a stand-up comedian myself, and I started training in improv early in my career, and then I eventually got into stand-up comedy. And what both of those things teach you is kind of to be very comfortable with mistakes. Improv teaches you to be comfortable with, you know, there is no way to make a mistake. Actually, in fact, every mistake that you make is an opportunity to shift the scene on its head and make it even funnier. In
Hmm.
stand up, the stakes get a little bit higher, you can obviously turn a mistake into a funny joke, but oftentimes, you'll say a joke in stand up and it could just die, you could hear just crickets, and it's the worst feeling ever. But how similar is that to business owners when they try a new experiment, maybe
Mhm.
invest in a new marketing strategy, and they do a new Google ad campaign, whatever it might be, and crickets. And those crickets are actually no leads, nothing. And you're like, what? This feels terrible. And what do? You don't close down shop. You don't give up. You say, how can I just change that one thing? How can I make a tweak? How can I iterate on it? And that's just like in stand up comedy. You don't quit and you don't give up the whole set. You say, what was good in that 5 minutes that I did or 10 minutes that I did? And was it just this small piece? Great. Let me change a word. Let me change the setup. Let me add a tag. So there's all these different components and levers in comedy that allow you to generate that laughter. And I don't think it's much different when it comes to creating strategies and deploying different ideas in a small business world. And it's the ability to say, like, hey, I'm not married to it. Let's pivot. And I think being able to pivot very easily is something that you need to be able to do in improv comedy and stand-up comedy, and ultimately in the business world. And the more your organization is also comfortable with pivoting, I think what going back to it starts at the top. I think if you as a leader are okay with admitting that you make mistakes and admitting that something didn't go well, it'll allow the team to say, great, everyone makes mistakes, including our leader. Now let's go ahead and make a change to what we're doing to try to get to our ultimate goal, which is usually, efficiency or money or whatever it might be.
And I would imagine too, if leadership is embracing humor, that it probably leads to better trust of that leadership. And I would imagine that those folks are a lot more relatable as opposed to being people who are in ivory towers and, they can do no wrong type of thing.
Yeah, and I also like to really differentiate between humor and like being a funny person and using comedy skills. Because I think a lot of people, when I first introduce it, they have this mindset of going, man, okay, let me open up a joke book and let me tell some jokes and let me kind of be a funny person now and let me study Seinfeld and see how he does it. Not necessarily. What you need to do is be just receptive and open and listen better and
Mm.
empathetically communicate and kind of welcome the energy of jokes and humor and welcome the energy of levity. And so that can come with being really okay with failure. I've already said it a million times, but actively listening to everybody, not interrupting your team when they have something to say. And when they're done saying that, not using words like no, but, or using words like yes, and validate what they're saying and building on top of it. And when you're using these, you're really specifically getting into the minutia. You're able to really make waves in the organization. And that is what comedy skills are about. And humor just follows. When you follow that formula and you follow those different rules of failure, listening, communication, what's going to happen is that people are just going to laugh more. People are going to feel more comfortable. And like you said, Benny, have more trust. And then
Yeah.
that trust leads to, okay, we can be a little bit more loose here. And and that'll generate more ideas. And that looseness does create more innovation.
The idea here, at least one of the perceptual things I'm picking up, is that it lowers defenses for a lot of people and probably increases that connection too at the same time where people can, wow, the approachability factor just to me, it seems like it would be, much easier for everybody. So, wow. I mean, if we think about like the cultural aspects of this, are there any other benefits that you're seeing, like in terms of like, I don't know, does humor help with retaining some ideas, or are you finding that creativity is boosted when we include humor into that? What do you see from that? Problem
Yeah.
solving, those type of things.
Well, the cool thing is there's so much applications to it. So oftentimes companies come to us and they're like, "Hey, this is what we're doing. We'd love to, bring you in. How can you apply it?" And so it can really come from a number of ways. But the way that I like to explain it the best and the most fun, especially with the emergence of AI in our organizations, is being able to be a much better divergent thinker. So AI is really good at helping us be convergent thinkers, and AI takes over rather our convergent thinking, A plus B equals C, stuff that has like a very finite answer and we just need the output. But what about divergent thinking, which is, really about the out there ideas? How do you create lists? How do
Mm.
you talk about things that are, brainstorming is what we would maybe call it. So what I always like to say is like, how can we use these exercises to help us become more innovative through training that divergent thinking muscle, which otherwise could get cut off if we start to ask one of these LLMs, give me some ideas. And what can we do to create more of these like different thinking ideas and come like me and my wife always like to, every time we watch a bad movie, we don't shut it off. We say, what are the 10 reasons why that movie stunk? Like let's come up with 10 new ideas. And it's different stuff like that. How do you create lists that are nonstop? How do you then validate the other person? Say, yes, and this stunk about it, and this and this and this. Or like, hey, if you're doing a project, instead of everyone being focused on like how to make it perfect and what's going wrong with it, start off by saying, hey, what's going right with this project? Everyone go around the table and say, what is going right with it? And so it changes people's ability to think about it and it comes up with more ideas rather than focusing on, the kind of finite aspects of it.
Dennis and I come from the world of technology, and so acronyms like SaaS, sales, software as a service, disaster recovery as a service, kind of is in our vernacular every day. You
Drafts?
you have a unique approach too as well in terms of services that you offer.
Yeah, I started in SaaS and I went from SaaS to laughter as a service.
So, what does that actually mean, Kevin? What is laughter as a service? I mean, I can derive a couple ideas. I love this. What is laughter as a service?
Yeah, I mean, we offer two different types of offerings. It's on the entertainment side of things where teams want to just bring in professionals to help them laugh more, whether that's a virtual comedy show or it's a in-person bringing a comedian in for their offsite or their holiday party, whatever it might be, a moment where people just want to celebrate, have fun, not think. Let's just laugh. Let's bring in a professional to do so. And then the other side of what we do is called laughing and development, and that is using comedy skills that are that stand-ups and improvisers train in and using those comedy skills to then train organizations through corporate workshops to help them, do all the things that we've been talking about today. And it's really just about how do we, take the guard down of being like, well, I'm not funny. I'm not I seen Whose Line Is It Anyways, and they're so good. I could never do that. It's kind of about taking that down and saying that's not at all what we're doing here. We're just about connecting with one another, and we're about, listening better and communicating better and just being silly with one another and creating all this psychological safety. And hopefully some of that can bleed into the workplace.
Yeah, I'm thinking it is. It's creating that safety net that it's okay to laugh at each other and have some fun. I mean, because some companies don't give you that freedom, but hopefully if you work for a company that does, it's a great culture to be in.
And it's okay to fail. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the psychological. We always say, don't judge the first 5 minutes of our session, judge the last 5 minutes, because the first 5 minutes, everyone's trying to do every exercise perfect. And we specifically make the exercises so out there and silly and wild that everybody has to make mistakes. And then we say, hey, raise your hand if you make mistakes. And everyone suddenly looks around and every single hand is up. And just so it kind of sets the stage that it's like everybody's making mistakes, including your manager who organized this whole thing. Now we've set the stage that nobody is above making mistakes, and let's just have some fun.
What you've talked about today is really interesting and unique. But I'm positive there are going to be other people who are going to have questions and want to know a little bit more about the programs you offer. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, our website is Laugh.Events. That's kind of the best place to, if you're interested in using our services, is there. We also have a newsletter called Laugh.Rx.Laugh.Events, but also just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm Kevin Hubschmann. I'm the only Kevin Hubschmann out there, so you can't miss me. And that's it. Those are definitely the three best places. And the whole goal is to just, again, help people have the tools and the resources to learn how to incorporate laughter more into their work lives and hopefully their after work lives.
Yeah. Great,
This is,
great medicine.
yeah, love it.
Yes,
Kevin,
sir.
thank you so much. This has been a great talk. I really have enjoyed it. It's fun and I think this is a unique angle to take toward work. So thanks again for stopping by.
Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun.
Thanks a lot, Kevin.
You've been listening to WFH with Two Guys. We'll see you next time.